Covering some 82,000 square miles in the heart of the Deccan Plateau, Hyderabad enjoyed a preeminence among the princely states of India as the richest territory in the British Raj. Its ruler, Nizam Mir Usman Ali Khan Bahadur, had been a staunch supporter of the Allied war effort, and come the independence of India, wished to retain his state's autonomy. In doing so, he would set into motion a series of events which would result in not only his personal fall from power, but the deaths of 50,000 of his subjects at the hands of the Indian army and paramilitary groups. This, then, is the bloody story of the accession of Hyderabad to the Indian Union. By 1947, the British Empire was in its final, waning days. Exhausted by war, it no longer possessed the strength or the will to retain the jewel which was its Indian holdings. To this end, on the 15th of August 1947, the British Raj, which had stood for 90 years, was partitioned into the two independent nations of India and Pakistan. This, however, was not a cut-and-dried affair. The Raj had ruled over a conglomeration of greater and lesser princes, who had ultimately all sworn loyalty to the British Crown. Authority was therefore diffuse and not necessarily absolute. By 1947, however, these same governments had become liabilities in Britain's negotiations with India's political leadership. They were representations of imperial continuity in a time of disillusionment. Due to this, the last Viceroy, Lord Louis Mountbatten, was placed in the unenviable position of facilitating a transfer of power which overlooked the princely states in favour of the new central government under Jawaharlal Nehru and his National Congress Party. There were some in the old Indian civil service, however, who found the idea of cutting the princes out of the independence process an unpalatable prospect. Sir Conrad Caulfield, former Joint Secretary of the Foreign and Political Department, was one such man. He succeeded in making sure that upon independence, all prior commitments between the princely states and Britain would lapse, leaving them to decide their own fates as sovereign entities. Thus, they were granted the choice between accession to India or Pakistan, or going it alone. The Indian Secretary of State, V.P. Menon, credited Britain as being the only power to successfully bring about India's enduring political consolidation. It is a compliment that is not entirely true. For a brief period between the 18th of July 1947 and the 13th of September 1948, its cohesiveness was fractured, and while not officially acknowledged by Delhi, legally correct. There existed for the first and last time since the 19th century princely states outside the control of either the British Empire or its Indian successor. The issue facing these states, however, was how to extricate themselves from an India intent on retaining them. The state of Junagadh was in a similar position in December of 1947, so much so that it was and still is considered to be a Hyderabad in miniature. Both were majority Hindu, both were ruled by Muslims, and both would be the target of military interventions. The main difference, which made Junagadh a more pressing issue than Hyderabad, was the decision of its Nawab, Muhammad Mahabet Khanji III, to join with Pakistan. Instead of seizing the territory outright, however, a threat was manufactured to compel righteous action. In this case, it was claimed the Nawab was stockpiling weapons and spoiling for a fight, threatening not only the majority Hindu population, but the surrounding Indian provinces. With no significant military forces at its disposal, such claims were transparently false, but sufficient as to consign Junagadh to a forced accession. In Hyderabad, however, the Indian government had the good fortune of facing a genuine Muslim organised resistance under the Razakars, the militant wing of the Majlis-e-Ittihad-ul-Muslimin party. The professed goal of the Razakars was to safeguard Islamic culture in the Deccan, or as India saw it, maintain the Islamic character of Hyderabad's ruling elite. Led by Qasim Razavi, a communal lawyer whose legend is a mixture of facts and fiction, their actions did little to diffuse the situation, and as will be discussed, contributed greatly to its deterioration. Therefore, in the Razakars, the Indian government enjoyed a genuine casus belli, in lieu of having to manufacture a threat, as had been their experience in Junagadh the year before. With the question of accession still unresolved on the day of Indian independence, political leaders on both sides recognised they faced an uphill struggle. As the premier prince and faithful ally of the British Raj, the Nizam's government was not inclined towards giving up its power to what, in their eyes, was an upstart, Hindu-dominated regime. Having witnessed the horrors of partition in the Punjab and accepted many refugees from the violence, they feared a repeat performance. In pursuit of allaying a hasty decision by either party, both sides agreed to a standstill agreement which effectively froze all pending business while negotiations continued. The three areas of defence, external affairs and communication were left under Indian control, while the Nizam's government continued to minister the state proper, critically, without granting paramountcy. However, even here things did not progress smoothly. The original document was ready to sign on the 28th of October, but through civil disobedience and mass protests organised by the MIM, was blocked and forced the resignation of the reform-minded Prime Minister. Despite this, even when controlling the negotiation team that returned to Delhi, Razavi would find it impossible to elicit any further concessions and would eventually sign the same agreement a month later. Instead, all he had achieved through his meddling was in confirming Indian bias and opinions regarding the MIM's malign influence in Hyderabadi politics. He would also provide an invaluable scapegoat come accession, fulfilling the role of dictator and India the beneficent liberator. Within Hyderabad, the Razakars were engaged in a campaign not only against pro-India factions, but importantly a communist uprising which had gripped the Telangana region of the state. Estimates place the death toll of the rebellion at 2,000, and when combined with the displacement caused by Muslim extremists and Indian raiders, resulted in 40,000 refugees flowing into the central provinces alone. The state authorities did take steps to deal with all these issues, although the levels of their success varied greatly. In May of 1948, the Nizam's government struck an agreement with the urban communists against the bourgeois Indian Union. This helped to somewhat stabilise the internal situation. However, the agitation caused by Indian-sponsored forces would prove beyond Hyderabad's abilities to influence. In conjunction with the State Congress, the local version of the ruling National Congress Party, the refugee camps which had sprung up in the neighbouring provinces would be used to train political agents and as bases for paramilitary raiding into Hyderabad. In the same month the standstill agreement was signed, Nehru would order a minimum of 60,000 rifles be dispensed in Bombay, Madras, the central provinces, and Berar, alongside military training in the latter two states. Therefore, there seems to be ample evidence to suggest that the willingness of the Indian government to delay Hyderabad's accession stemmed from a need to prepare the way for invasion, the Nizam's domains being a hardier meal than those of Junagadh. In August 1948, the raids diminished in frequency as conventional forces began to build up along the border. If ever there was a clearer link between the disruption and sabotage of the previous year and official Indian policy, this calm before the storm is the most convincing. The refugee camps were shut down, and the army prepared to finish what the paramilitaries had started, only this time under an Indian flag. Within Hyderabad itself, the government and the people had resigned themselves to grandiose delusions, such as fleets of Lancaster bombers decimating the enemy, and startling military victories to ease their nerves. The disorder campaign had eroded the government's ability to function as panic set in, thus achieving a situation ripe for invasion. Operation Polo would take the Indian Army 4 days to take control of the state, at the cost of 2,000 dead Razakars and 42 Indian soldiers. Of the Razakar casualties, many were simply prominent Muslims, or suspected of having ties with the MIM, thus distorting the political and religious breakdown of those killed in the violence even further. A government investigation following accession, the Sunderlal report, estimated the death toll between 27,000 and 40,000. This is significantly lower than the typically accepted 50,000 death toll, and far lower than some estimates which claim upwards of 100,000 people died. Regardless, the report was suppressed by Delhi until 2013, and decried by General J.N. Chowdhury as propagating the grossest inaccuracies. Given that he commanded the invasion and was appointed governor of Hyderabad, it is unsurprising he was sensitive to any criticism of how the operation was carried out. To a similar end of downplaying events, Polo will be described as a mere police action, an internal security matter lacking any international character. The UN Security Council was duly informed. All matters relating to Hyderabad are now dealt with regularly by the Government of India as matters of domestic concern. Unlike many historical events, the accession of Hyderabad and the actions of all involved is still a live political issue. In 1979, communal riots would rack the state, and tensions remained high throughout the territory during the 1980s. The MIM has surprisingly survived and thrived, allowing the minority Muslim population to concentrate its power in the parliamentary system. Due to its contemporary relevance, it is more difficult to investigate the truths of Hyderabad's fate without drawing recrimination for either the Muslim or Hindu side of the debate. The villainy of the Razakars has been the accepted narrative for over 50 years, and to suggest otherwise is to open oneself to accusations of pardoning their crimes. In actuality, there is more than enough blood and culpability to go around. Acknowledging the atrocities committed by the Indian Army does not excuse those of the MIM, of which there were many, but rather helps us to understand the truth of events more fully, outside of the confines of India's national mythos.